So next up, we want to take our player script. We want to make our movement a little bit smaller, a little more concise on the code side. Right now this works perfectly fine, and when you're first starting off, it's okay to go about it in this manner. One of the things that we have to kind of bear in mind, though, is that some of the input that we use can actually be brought back out to our input manager. That way we can change and adjust keys based on the values that a player sets at the beginning of a game. And to do this, we actually want to use something a little bit different. We want to go back to our input.getAccess so that we can use the input variables that we have inside of Unity. So let's go ahead and get started with it. We'll go ahead and you can either, if you want to hang on to it, you can just comment the code out. We can just use our, over in our star, and just block out that section. Or, if you want to, you can go ahead and get rid of it, and we can add in a different set of code. So I'm going to go ahead and just take this one, and we'll take it all the way up to here. So again, we go back to the movement. We want to be able to move this object, and what we want to do is we want to set our movement to a variable. So we're going to go in, we're going to go ahead and just make a variable inside of our update. We're going to call this one, let's say this is our translation. We're making a translation movement. We're going to be storing translation movement. So we'll call this our trans vertical. And this is going to be a float variable. We'll make it equal to our input dot get access. And the get access that we're going to be looking for, we are doing it as a V for vertical, so we're going to be getting our vertical. And if you're unfamiliar with how to set up the get access, then make sure that you take your get access, take a peek at it inside of your scripting API, and we can see that the static function get access, and it's looking for a string name. It's going to give us back a float variable, and that float is what we're storing in our trans v right here. So we've got our vertical inside of quotations for the string, and we're going to go ahead and multiply this out by our player speed, and times our time.delta time. So this is going to get us for our vertical. We're going to be basically doing the exact same line of code for our horizontal, except we're going to get the horizontal string, and we can just copy and paste this. Again, if you haven't done that much coding, copy and paste isn't really your friend. You really want to sit there, type it out, get comfortable and familiar with the words that you're using. And here we're going to place in translation for the H for the horizontal. We're going to look for our horizontal input. We're going to multiply it by our player speed, and times the time delta time for our timer instead of the speed of a computer. So here we go, we're looking at this. Now, one of the variables that we do have, we have our player speed. We could actually change this so we had a variable for the player speed vertical and the player speed horizontal. If the game actually needed it, this is where you could change up and add different variables can control those speeds and adjust the design and the flow of the game. So just that we actually have that, let's go ahead and do that. We're going to do a player speed vertical, and we'll do a player speed horizontal. We'll make it equal to 10 to start off with. And just because we've got the vertical at the top, we'll go ahead and flip-flop these around, put this one below just for the way we've got it formatted. So let's take our player speed vertical. We're going to replace it with just the player speed here. We'll take our player speed horizontal and place it right there. So now we've got control of the speed for both of these. Now you notice though that we don't have an if statement about getting input for our for our object. We're not looking for that input. We're storing our input and the variable that we get from our input into the translation vertical and translation horizontal. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to go back in and we want to put this variable somewhere into a statement. And that statement needs to be something that we're actually moving. So how do we move? We're doing our transform dot translate, and then inside of our translate function, and again, always have that API up just so that you can constantly go back to it, double check what is that function, what are the arguments inside of it, what do I need to fill in, and depending on what scripting tool you're using, you may have that information come up when you type the words in. Let's say we're going to do our translate, and then inside we're going to fill this in. We're going to say we've got our translation vertical and horizontal. This might be our X and Y, and the Z is really the depth, and we're not playing with the depth on this one, so we can leave that one with a 0. So let's just do our trans H, and let's make sure we spell these right. Trans H, comma, trans vertical, and 0 for our Z depth. Okay. Now we have condensed the code a lot more than from before. We've only got it down to just 3 lines of code. We're checking for vertical, horizontal, and then we get our movement right in here. So let's go ahead and save this and try it out. So we'll save this one out. And let's go back over into Unity. Let's select on our player object. And our player object, we now see we've got a player speed vertical, a player speed horizontal. And we're going to make this just a little bigger so we can see it all. There we go. And we're at 10 and 10, the 2 default values that we set in. So we'll go ahead and hit play. Now that we hit play, we can go over to our arrow keys. We should be able to go left and right, and up and down. So functionally speaking, we've got the exact same functionality that we did before. But from a coding perspective, we have something that is smaller. We have something that's a little more concise. We have something that is using functionality that's already built into Unity and taking advantage of that. And that's what we want to do. We want to, as little as often, recreate the wheel. If that functionality is already available to us, then take advantage of that functionality. If it's something that we can just add to, we can add to that functionality. But at the end of the day, we want to conform as best as we can to what is built into Unity. So here we go. We've got our movement controls for our player set up and ready. And the next thing we want to do, we're going to start looking at how can we limit some of the motion. How do we define the boundaries for our game? And we'll do that next.